Alright guys, welcome back to the Begin series. We have the first replay analysis today. Satirus X has sent in me a replay. I've been asking you guys when you send in these replays just to give a little bit about your experiences with the game. So Satirus has played about 50 to 70 ranked games, and he's mainly been using this Sveltana vampire deck, and is hovering around rank commander. So he seems to have gotten a pretty decent grasp on the basics. So we're going to go over some more complex topics and try to start really playing around our opponent's cards, considering our threats, and then also understanding the way we beat the decks we are versing. So I can tell you guys a little bit about Hakim, the hero he will be facing today. So Hakim nowadays is mainly played as a construct deck. This means it's using cards such as the Makeshift Golem with the construct creature class, and then it will be returning those cards to hand whenever they die using a very powerful card called Titan Workforce. Now this is one of the strongest cards in the game, and if you can't get an immediate answer, it will roll over you in the late game. Now Sveltana is a very interesting necro hero, and is really centered around that vampire theme. So the main defining characteristics for her are dark and air schools. Now the dark spell school is quite strong, but very meta dependent. And I've said this before, and what I mean by this is that if the meta is slow, if people are playing with big creatures and going into the late game, dark magic can be really strong, because it has that ability to just instantly kill creatures or take them over herself. Now Sveltana is either normally played in a 4-4-1 or up to 4-6-1 for enthralls. Now air magic isn't going to offer too much, but there are a couple of things that it can offer in a Sveltana deck. So we also have the ability, and this is the key part of Sveltana, where it's going to take a target vampire creature card with a requirement of 3 might or less, and deploy it for free onto the battleground. Now this gives Sveltana a decent late game, but what it really gives is that consistency. So if you have a bunch of vampire cards out there, you know, instead of having to draw a card and hope, you know exactly what you can get, and you can bring back some decent threats for 3 might, and some of those cards are going up to the 4 resource slot. So before we jump in, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Sveltana and how she fits into the current meta. Now, before Griffin Bane came out, and after the release of Base Set 2, Necro were absolutely dominating the meta. I mean, you would see them nearly in every game, at times. And one thing about Necro is they have a lot of flyer creatures. Now what this means is Father Sky's Wrath can absolutely destroy a Necro deck. So what Father Sky's Wrath does, for you guys that don't know, is it's a 5 resource spell with 5 magic costs, and what it's going to do is we're going to return 1 creature to its owner's hand, and then deal 6 damage to all remaining enemy creatures that have flying on your opponent's side of the board. So obviously if there's a lot of flyers, then it absolutely can destroy your opponent's board in one simple spell. Now the thing with this card is, against Stronghold especially, and Inferno, they don't have a lot of flying creatures. This means it's basically going to be a glorified town portal that's going to sit in your hand for quite a long time, not really doing anything. So, in a Necro meta, this makes Sveltana a really good choice for a Necro deck. She has access to that card, but in the Stronghold meta we're currently experiencing, she can be a little bit iffy. So, the disadvantages Sveltana has over other Necro decks, such as Syria, that may choose to run a vampire deck, is to have access to water magic for Syria and insect swarm for Ariana. And this is one of the problems with Sveltana. If Father Sky's Wrath's not going to be doing anything, then it really lacks a reliable board clear, as air magic does not really offer a lot. Alright guys, so we're ready to start the game. Let's go. We've got Satirus starting second. Generally pretty nice for any deck. In this matchup it's not any more important than other matchups. So we can see our opponent's hand, and honestly it's not great. He does have that circle of 9, which you're always looking for early, but he has 2 of them that are going to be dead cards in his hand quite a while before he's able to cycle them. Now we do start off with the 2-drop, which is nice. He chooses to block, it doesn't really matter. The creature is going to be moving in front of it most likely anyways, so I think it's just fine. Probably actually best, as it stops another skirmisher coming down and then dealing 1 damage with the original one, but in all honesty it's not making a big difference. Now he plays the makeshift golem, and this is a bit of an awkward turn. So he doesn't have a 3-drop, he only has 1 card he can play for only 1 resource, which is actually really going to do nothing at the moment. He does have the option of using the Day of Fortune to try and cycle, but the rest of his hand is actually quite strong. So it's definitely fine just to play it, get it out early. We're not too worried about getting rushed down. The one key thing to remember with the Titan Workforce decks is we do need to apply them a lot of pressure early on, because they do have an outstanding late game with Titan Workforce, as there's really no way you can get card advantage against them. So he gets the circle of 9 out. We're never happy to see that, but the rest of his hand is fairly mediocre. Okay, so finally we can actually play a big creature onto the board. He uses the Vampire Ritual Altar as well, as this is going to do quite well. Now, a lot of the vampire creatures actually can do quite well against Academy, because a lot of creatures like the Vampire Connoisseur have an effect that can do extra damage or get another attack if the creature has 1 or less attack, and as we can see, Academy does have quite a few of these creatures. Now, there's not a lot he could have really done differently here. Just one thing here, he did have the option to increase his might and play the Death Lord. There's no real advantage of playing the Spider Guard first, so I probably would just got that Death Lord out there, and it's also going to do a lot of work against these low attack creatures. The only advantage I could possibly think of is that maybe we can bait out a single Soul Reaver that he might have in his hand, but I'd still probably go for the Death Lord. You want to get your threats out early. Either way, it's still fine though. Okay, so we can see our opponent's hand is looking pretty lackluster at the moment, though he does have those makeshift golems to start drawing into some of those bigger construct creatures. Okay, so this is one thing where we can kind of see where decks with earth magic and water magic can do a bit better, and they can punish their opponent's positioning with this stuff, with geysers and insect swarms, etc. So now he's going to choose to play the Death Lord, which is fine. He's going to get that ability out anyway, managing to kill off the makeshift golem and restoring health to his hero. So he chooses to Day of the Sanctuary. I believe he chose the correct one here, making sure his most valuable creature is protected from Soul Reaver. Just want to take a quick second to talk about that leveling up of the requirement. Now he does have a Zephyria and a Banshee in hand, so if he does decide to use that next turn, since he has no real strong creatures in the graveyard, he may choose to draw a card anyway. So because we're at 7 resources, we always want to be spending our resources efficiently, so he had the option of increasing magic there, so he doesn't have to do it next turn, so he can play one of those creatures. And if he doesn't want to increase his fortune, then he has the option to draw a card, and then maybe he can do it on the following turn when he wouldn't be spending those resources anyway. So it's just the small things. We just want to plan it out, our requirements for the next few turns. Now, the Creeping Darkness does come down, so they continue to put crippling counters on enemy creatures at random, and now if this eventually gets combined with Titan Workforce, that's going to be a lot of ongoing spells and fortunes. They're going to continue to whittle our board down and growing the size of our opponent's hands. Now here he chooses to use Sveltana's ability to resurrect the Vampire Connoisseur. Now this is quite decent. He's not really going to be gaining any extra health on his creatures because of the ability, but the thing is, his hand is very reactive. We have a lot of things that can kill off creatures, return big creatures to hands, and then restore cards from our graveyard, but we don't have any at the moment because we have a lot of board control, and we haven't had our board cleared. So he chooses to play the vampire. So I feel like this is pretty fine. Maybe you could have some merit to playing Zephyria and getting some more presence out on the board, but I think it's fine. You're not really getting any more presence, and we're just playing patiently. So the other option he did have was just to draw a card. I think they're both perfectly fine options, and he's playing fine. So he definitely seems to have a good grasp on the basics and decent strategy. Just a few small mistakes here and there, but thankfully there's no actually obvious mistakes that are actually going to make a clear difference. Everything I've been able to talk about so far has really just been, minor strategical mistakes. So we can see his opponent is starting to get those bigger constructs in his hand, and he'll continue to do so should he get the Titan Workforce out, which he chooses to. And then he plays a Guardian Golem. Now his opponent makes a bit of a mistake here, I feel, playing it in this row. I'd prefer to play it in the top row, not to trigger the Death Lord's ability, allowing him to kill it off immediately with the Spider Guard. Now, once again, bit of a hard turn for him to really develop any more threats, but he does get the Spider Guard out there, and he actually manages to spot this really nice Wick of the Elder Races. So that's going to buff up all those vampires' attack, allowing him to push through 5 more damage using the Death Lord's ability, and that's what we really need to start doing against a Hakim Titan Workforce out. We need to start pressuring his life total, because given the time, he will absolutely take over the game. So our opponent is just setting up their board and getting ready to just get a lot of constructs in hand and win in the late game. So Satas needs to recognize that he needs to apply pressure as early as possible. Now we can see he's got a bit of an awkward hand here. He doesn't really have any solid threats on themselves. Now, I think there's good merit into playing a Hailstorm. Allow us to kill it off, get another 4 damage through using the Death Lord's ability once again. So I believe that was probably the right play. He chooses to play Zephyria, which I'm not really sold on, to be honest. I mean, he can return it to his hand, but that's not really going to do anything. So I think I would have Hailstormed, killed it off once, and then using the double attack to get 4 more damage through. That's what we really need to do. And so he's left with 2 mana open, so he gets to use the Day of the Sanctuary. Now here he chooses to use it on the Zephyria. Now, our opponent may not be running any Soul Reavers or Enthralls, but we might as well assume they are for the sake of this event. So let's say they are. We're not too worried about the Zephyria dying compared to the Death Lord. Now we've seen nearly everything, I believe everything his opponent's played has ended up with 1 attack or less, triggering the Death Lord's ability. So as you can see, the Death Lord has done a ton of work. It's gotten our vampires a lot of extra attacks, so I'd be more concerned protecting that, and they have similar stats anyway. But nonetheless, it's still fine. Our opponent doesn't have it, so chooses to play the Generator Titan. Finally, something we need to deal with, and we can start using our reactive spells. Now he does play a Guardian Golem to protect it. He also had the option of just making it untargetable, and then playing a Makeshift Golem, which maybe I would have preferred to do. But it does get us to use a Soul Reaver on that Guardian Golem. Now we're happy to take the 4 damage from killing off that creature, as we do have the life drain of the vampires. So that's fine. Our board is a bit fragile to double Insect Swarm, but I mean we still have a lot of graveyard recursion, plenty of cards in hand, so I think this is perfectly fine. And we do need to pressure our opponent, because as you can see, in a short amount of time his hand has actually gotten really big, and it's going to keep getting bigger as he returns card back and back to his hand. Now our opponent is a bit greedy here and chooses not to Day of the Sanctuary this Generator Titan in the top row, which can provide it's really one of his main win conditions to prevent us killing off the creature. So if we kill it off first, none of our creatures are going to die, and we will be able to get more damage through. And he really should know to expect that we do have an answer for that card, in fact. So a couple of options we have here. We definitely want to be killing off that generator Titan in some form or another. So we're just going to use that Soul Reaver. Now we have a lot of damage we can push through. It does have the option of giving Swift to one of these and then attacking for one more damage, though we're not too worried about that. That's fine. So everything's looking pretty good. We have a lot of removal, so next turn we really just want to be pushing through the damage. Okay, so just one thing I wanted to highlight. I have talked about this in previous videos. We need to consider how we can lose. And basically not moving the Death Lord there out of the way of the Generator Titan before it died did put it in range of Insect Swarm, dealing 3 damage to all creatures. If we could keep it at full health, then it will even survive 2 Insect Swarms. But nonetheless, it's fine play. Our opponent's kind of shown he hasn't got it. Now I believe lethal is missed on this one. So what could happen is simply we need to lightning bolt this creature first, dealing 4 damage to that. Destroy the other one, managing to hit for 2, and then giving Swift with Blessing of the Storm to either Zephyria, just to Zephyria, and then moving it to the top lane to attack. And so that would be the lethal. Unfortunately, Sataris does not see this, but he is still looking in a pretty decent position. He chooses to kill off his own creature to bring it back from the grave. That's fine. I would have preferred to do it with the Banshee, seeing as we have a Atropos in hand. We're going to be able to bring it back to our hand next turn and to kill off another creature. So he is getting those big constructs out. So if we can't finish him in the next couple of turns, then obviously he actually could get the board control back, and that could be really difficult for us to come back from. But seeing as we have a lot of removal in hand, it should be as easy as opening up a lane to deal that final 3 damage. Now conveniently, it is important to note that we do have 2 lanes able to do 3 damage, as well as this top lane here, and that can be quite important in finishing off a game when your opponent is at low health, to make lanes that you know you can clear eventually in order to win the game. So Sataris sees this, killing off the one creature first, but does allow him to Banshee for the finish in the end. Okay, so as Sataris is just making sure that this Banshee is in fact going to win him the game, I can start to talk a bit about some possible deck building options. Now I know this is the beginner series, guys. You will not have all the cards. I mean, even I do not have some of the cards. It's nothing to be ashamed of. So there are some cards we want to work towards eventually, and there are some more important than others. Okay, so one option for Sveltana is the Boneyard, which is going to continually bring back those creatures with a resource cost of 2 or less each turn. That gives you a really strong late game, and makes it really hard for your opponent to push through damage. Now, notice Sataris has been only running 2 Banshees and 2 Death Lords, so obviously this is probably because he doesn't have those cards yet, but they are really useful cards in any Necro deck. The Banshee is, and then the Death Lord is really good in Vampire decks, and we saw how much work it did against Academy. It's not so great against Stronghold though, and also more heavy removal Dark Spells schools. So one option I wanted to talk about for Sveltana, which I used to run myself, is going up to 6 magic for enthralls. So for those of you who don't know about enthrall, it's a 6 resource cost, 6 magic requirement. It's basically going to take a enemy creature onto your side of the board until enthrall leaves the battleground. So that does give the deck a bit more late game. But I do understand he has been struggling a bit with the Titan Workforce decks, and with those decks we do want to apply pressure, so that can go either way. Now Hakim does have access to Broken Bridges, so that will return those cards to hand, rendering enthrall fairly useless. But it also can mean that we get a big construct, we're able to protect it, then that can be enough, because it also won't go back to his hand with Titan Workforce. Now one other card I want to talk to, he did have Ariana's Lair, and so one key deck building thing, guys, is sure, resource costs may seem like a really important factor, but we also have to consider those requirements. Now Ariana's Lair has a fortune requirement of 2 in a deck. We start with 1 might and 2 magic only. Now the problem with this is basically any turn you're leveling up a requirement, that's 1 less card you could be drawing. So even though Ariana's Lair may seem like a decent card, returning a creature card from the graveyard, it basically means that with this 2 turns we have to up our fortune and not draw a card instead. So that's not that much better than just getting a creature back from the graveyard anyway, so I'd cut that. The only thing we want to go into fortune for is a Tropos, which you do have in the deck. I've also noticed the curve is not great, so we were lucky to get a 2-drop in that game, but the deck has only 5 creatures that we can drop on turn 2. We have the 2 Ariana's Lair as well, but that's not something you're going to be playing on turn 2 anyway. So with only 5 2-drops in the deck, it's going to be hard to always keep up in the early game, and we want to be applying some early pressure with Sveltana, and we really want to be doing most of our work in the mid to late game though. If you do face a lot of Necro, as I said before, Father Sky's Wrath can be really good, and I've heard there is a decent amount of Necro at the lower ranks. One card I also wanted to suggest you move out of the deck, Sataris, is the War Banner, 5 costs. It is going to be giving all vampire creatures +1 attack, but with 5 resources, it's just too much of a win more card. So what I mean when I say a win more card is that it's a card that does extremely well when you are already winning the game. If I already have a lot of vampire creatures out, I give them 1 more attack, sure, that's great. But if I'm losing, or only have a couple of creatures on the board, it's not really going to be doing anything for me. So there are better options. So also try and get some more consistent events. Now there aren't a lot of good events for Necro. The Week of the Elder Races is decent. We do have a really high creature count in this deck, so Week of the Mercenaries will be doing a similar function, though obviously this is a card that can be hard for new players to get. So that's basically all my criticism. I feel like you played extremely well, especially for someone who's just learnt the game. You had a decent idea of strategy. You pushed for damage when you needed to. Just a couple of things. Remember, think about which creature we really want to protect today in the Sanctuary. Make sure to play around broken bridges. And really just make sure we count lethal every turn. So if you have easy way I like to do it is every turn, if I see my opponent's health, if I can just add up my creature's total attack or total damage they can do, if that's more than the health of my opponent, then I can start actually looking for ways to get lethal. It doesn't take too long, guys, so just try and make it. You never know if you lose a game every now and then because you do miss lethal. So it's just something to keep in mind. So thanks very much for Sataris for sending in this replay. I will be emailing you your Griffin Bane code. And guys, keep sending those replays in. I plan on doing lots more in the future. So if you want a chance to win a Griffin Bane Super Pack, get a couple of wildcards, please send it in. Make sure you give us some information about your experience with the game, and any matchups you may have trouble with. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you have any feedback, please leave it below in the comments on the Reddit thread or in the forums. Thanks a lot.